There has been a long process of steadily accelerating mechanisation since the Industrial Revolution. It has changed the entire economy, brought people out of the fields to work in factories, and then out of the factories to work frontline service. The bulk of labour has moved from the primary to the secondary to the tertiary sectors of the economy. Machines made farming easier and less labour intensive. Machines made factory work easier and less labour intensive. Machines are now making service and managerial professions easier and less labour intensive. The Luddites, skilled craftsmen and artisans left behind in the early days of the Industrial Revolution, sought to destroy milling machines to protect their economic status. As economists now know, in spite of disrupting the economy, the mills did not cause persistent mass unemployment, since labour simply shifted roles and adapted to the new form of economy. This has been the way ever since. As primary sector production such as agriculture and mining declined in the developed countries and was offshored, while there was disruption and unrest, the result was not a permanent state of high unemployment. Extra labour simply moved to the secondary sector of factory work, and creating new products from the raw materials of the primary sector. Over time, relative employment has been weighted towards newer and newer sectors, and much employment in the developed nations is now in what is called either the tertiary or service or sales sector of the economy. In the UK, for example, we have gone from 22% of the working population employed in agriculture in 1841 to 1% of the working population today. The economy has changed, and in spite of booms and busts, new ways to employ low-skilled labour have always become available. Subsequently, we have coined the idea that mechanisation causes permanent job loss, the Luddite fallacy. But mechanisation has continued, and we now call it automation. The problem now is that it seems like the Luddite fallacy can itself be a fallacy, if improperly extended beyond the conditions in which it operates. As the economy becomes more and more automated, there are fewer sectors left to shift low-skilled workers to. The dawn of the computer age has finally matured on its promises, and we now stand on the brink of a world of mass unemployment. If a machine can perform the same role as a particular worker with less maintenance cost, then the machine will save a company money in that role. The low-skilled worker in a factory already performs rote-like repetitive tasks. That worker is easily replaced. They could always work at McDonald's, but the machines are coming for jobs there too. They're coming for service sector jobs, because computers are catching up to humans. Previously, machines could only outmuscle us, but what happens when they start to outthink us? Ray Kurzweil, inventor, popular science writer and futurist, has long pointed out an accelerating trend in technological growth. This trend is exemplified in the observation Moore's law, that the number of transistors on a dense integrated circuit would double every 18 months. Since computers have come to take over much of the economy, this growth trend is going to affect the economy in very deep structural ways. Google Cars, Watson, Baxter, Dragon Naturally Speaking are all examples of innovations in computers being able to provide for tasks at high degrees of efficacy that were not achievable 10 years ago. New capabilities in computers are on the cusp of completely changing the economy and inducing a state of mass unemployment. Kurzweil uses an estimate for the calculations per second of the brain by comparison to the brain's 10 to the 15 synapses, and combines it with Moore's law extrapolated out into the future to produce a date of 2029 when a $1,000 machine can match the power of the human mind. Naturally, we have to have the right algorithms. This goes beyond just Moore's law as well. Providing that you are a physicalist, you must accept that all the capabilities of the human brain are provided by its structure, and that as a consequence we can artificially match any human performance level once we have a sufficient general theory of minds, and enough computing power to do so. Incidentally, given that the space of all possible minds is larger than the scope of the human species, an artificial mind would not be under the same emotional constraints as humans, who have evolved certain instincts contrary to 24/7 labour. You can get superior performance while avoiding ethical issues, since a sapient being can be created. This is, even if a being is sapient, it can be created in such a way that it has an evolutionary novel value system, such as enjoying working constantly. So the oppression of robots, robot rights, or robot uprisings, in a direct sense, seem to be non-issues here, though I'll cover that in more detail in another video. At any rate, the long-run path of the economy is clear. Machines doing all the work, even including the work necessary to mine their raw materials and build more robots or fix defective ones, at least when the automation loop is closed. The long-run trend of the economy is one in which zero human labour is required to keep it in operation. Even if Moore's law falls down, a physical mind cannot escape investigation of its physical structure by science. It's pure accumulation. The robots are coming for your jobs sooner or later, and if we do listen to the estimates, they're going to be coming sooner than you think. A study from Oxford University estimated that 45% of US jobs were vulnerable to automation in the next 20 years. This has some very important economic consequences. For an individual company, automating its labour away will bring it fantastic reductions in cost. However, if every company in the economy automates away its labour, then something very interesting happens. In lieu of wealth redistribution, each worker now permanently employed has no income, which means they have no disposable income, which means they can engage in no consumption, which means that all of those businesses which unemployed them can gather no revenue, and therefore have no profits. This is where libertarians need to accept at least one Keynesian insight: the fallacy of composition. Individually beneficial actions can add up to a harmful whole, in this case one that would destroy the economy completely. As libertarians, we are willing to trade some security for freedom, at a greater level than other philosophies, but to trade all of it means a total loss when faced with an absolute macro-scale economic reckoning. Thankfully, an easy solution awaits: a basic income guarantee. As automation bites hard, any basic income in place will become easier for the government to pay, since automation is also lowering the cost of government administration at the same time as for the private sector. Labour costs all round are lowered steadily towards zero, and that means taxes shrink towards zero too. If libertarians are fast and realise this, they could help at getting such a thing in place when it starts to become needed. If libertarians do this and support a universal welfare system, we can get in place deregulations to business at the same time, as we will also need credibility to fight regulations the progressive left will have in the pipeline for home forms of production stemming from additive manufacturing technology and advancements on the 3D printers we see today. We must split the difference. If we do not, then the far left lurks in the wings, and their response will be quite different from the moderate or liberal left. A plan to preserve private enterprise through an externality crisis with universal restitution will be seen as a way of maintaining what they consider to be bourgeois slavery. If the basic income guarantee is not put in place soon enough, they will leap at revolution to enact their false economic doctrine. They want nothing less than state ownership of all the means of production, and the abolition of private ownership of the means of production, and unlike their SOC-Dem counterparts, they aren't willing to compromise about it. If a universal basic income guarantee is not put in place, there will be economic crises, there will be mass unemployment, and they will have the perfect argument for a more radically left solution. They will retort that they want common or collective ownership and not mere state ownership, but anyone who knows the history of communist movements knows otherwise. Fundamentally, you cannot have a large-scale system controlled by all the people at once, unless you distribute its parts. By centralising capital, the Marxists can only be state capitalists and nothing else. They may be able to bring restitution to the propertyless, but it will come at the cost of handing the control over the means of production from many hands to fewer. Every dictatorship of the proletariat is actually a dictatorship of the bureaucrats. Don't be fooled. The common person who needs restitution will be vulnerable to anyone who provides it, no matter what they bring with it. So anyone who wants to fight the Marxists who will take an opportunity from the coming crisis must solve the crisis and offer restitution themselves. We must pull a libertarian version of Otto von Bismarck's State Socialismus. Though welfare is fundamentally no socialism, control over the means of production remains private under welfare capitalism, the common person with left sympathies wants social services and is indifferent to Marxist doctrine on collectivization or the labour theory of value, which incidentally an automated economy renders false, since means of production in the form of robots will be able to produce more use value than proletarian labour put into them. Marxism terminated.